Hello and welcome to Metro Home Theater Tech Tips. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
Welcome aboard. What do we got today, Adam?
Well, today is going to be another part 2, or the second episode of a networking net series that we're working on, which is going to wind up being like something like 7 or 8 episodes long, because to be perfectly honest, we get these networking questions a lot. If you guys call in and talk to us whenever it comes to surveillance equipment or anything else like that, a lot of times you'll get me or Lewis on the phone. Hopefully never you, because you know diddly squat when it comes to that.
That's not my gig.
Yep. Or you'll get Stuart. And so we get these questions a lot of, well, what is an IP address? What is DHCP? How do I port forward? Why do I need a VLAN? And all these other things. And so this is...
Wait a minute. You have to keep your port forward? It can't be starboard?
I mean...
It can't be to the rear?
So, old jokes aside, we'll move forward. No. Yeah.
What is today's class?
Today's class, we're going to be talking about DHCP, what it is, why you should use it, why you shouldn't use it.
Now, here's my favorite part of this whole thing. What is DHCP?
I wrote it down. It's Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. In fact, you can see here, I wrote it down on my whiteboard. Because, honestly, this is one of those things that there are so many...
Acronyms?
Acronyms, thank you. I was going to call it an anachronism.
No,
but that's
me.
what that is over there.
That's
me. We need to get our handy cam so they can see what that is.
Well, just so you know, it's word of the day is anachronism.
Grab that. Grab that and bring it on here. Just yank it off of there. We have a word of the day. Today's word of the day is anachronism, a person, place, thing, or idea whose time has passed, and that seems to belong to an earlier age. This is my own personal belief when it comes to these systems. This is just an inside joke between Brent and I. But Vantage Lighting, physical currency, x86 computer architecture, etc., and Brent. So...
And by the way, I picked me on that one.
He actually wrote that down himself, so we were allowed to make fun of him for that. So anyways, what we're talking about today is DHCP, what it is, how it works, when you should use it, when you should not use it, and why is what really we're going to come down to on that.
And it's one of those things that we honestly do get a lot of calls, and some of them actually wind up in my court because they're busy. And this is fortunately one of the things I'm not a complete idiot on.
Sure.
Networking wise.
Yeah.
I do understand the difference between... Explain to me how this is working, Adam.
It's working really, really well. There we go. Try that again.
And somebody's binging.
Yeah, it's me. Don't worry about it. Anyways, so when we talk about DHCP, now, as always, guys, thank you for checking in with us today. What I would like to say is, leave us a question about what we're talking about. If there's a topic that you think that we should be talking about, let us know. Okay, good. Let us know in the comment section, in the chat section. Let's see, comments down there, chat section over here. But there's actually another reason why you should do that. I got the approval from the GM. We are putting on a giveaway. So what's going to be happening is everybody gets a chance. Put a comment in the comment section or over in the chat section. Yeah, you got to put it in. There you go. You are terrible at this right now. There. Okay. Put a comment over in the chat, put a comment down in the comment section. Everyone has an opportunity for this series of episodes where we're doing networking. You have an opportunity to go on and leave a comment, and you will get a chance to put your name in the runnings for this 4-channel PoE kit for the new Spyclops Pro. So definitely go online, or while you're watching the video, put a comment or a question or anything in there. Every episode you get a new chance to put that in there to be put in for the runnings for it. We're going to do a raffle and giveaway to the...
A lucky winner.
To a lucky winner. So, comment, put it in the chat.
Employees
give us ideas.
And friends of Metro Home Theater are not allowed.
Well, all of our dealers, all of our distributors, everyone who does anything with us are friends. So the friends are, just if anybody works at Metro is not allowed for it. So, okay, so definitely put that over in the chat section, or if you have comments and you're watching this after the fact, I will leave it open to the comments as well until we end this series. The last episode of this series is the episode that will give it away.
The following week we'll do the raffle.
Yes, that'll work. Okay, so, Brent, today's episode is very simply, did I hit the right button? I did not, because you did something.
I like that.
You did something. What did you do? There it is.
And
we're going to blame you.
What would be something that I did possibly be?
I have no clue.
Okay.
I have
Just
no clue.
blame the old guy.
We're going to blame you
blame
anyways.
the old guy. Okay.
There we go.
When we're dealing with DHCP,
Yep.
let's start with the basics. Why is DHCP the most common way to deal with network products in a residential application?
So the first thing that we have to understand is what is DHCP, because that's going to come into effect as to why is it so commonly used by the residential applications. So DHCP, it's the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol.
I'm going to sit down and enjoy this because this is going to be a long-winded explanation.
So DHCP basically is this. Inside of your router, which is the most common place that it's going to be, you can also have a dedicated DHCP server. You see those in like large organizations. You also see it with your service provider. They have their own DHCP service that they use to give you a WAN IP address for your location. Unless you get a static IP address because you're a business, or if you have AT&T Uverse, they give out static IP addresses to everybody.
Stop. Explain the difference between WAN and LAN before you go any further.
We'll review that. So LAN, of course, LAN is the local area network. That's your network. That's the network that's inside your house or your business. WAN is the wide area network. That's the one where the internet is. We'll just to use colloquial terms for it.
The rest of the world is WAN.
It's the rest of the world. It's everything outside that front door.
You are LAN, they are WAN.
Correct. So, with that said, DHCP is what's happening when you take your new shiny device and you connect it to the network. That DHCP is how that network gives that device an IP address. Very simply put, all it's doing is the device connects to the network. It says, hey, I'm a new device to the router. Router says, great, you are now this number. It gives it a name. It gives it a nickname, so to speak. And then at that point, it says, okay, well, that's how you are going to communicate with me. That's my IP address, and that's how we're able to find it.
So let's assume I'm a device and you're the network.
Sure.
Now, due to social distancing requirements, I'm not allowed to walk up and greet you anymore.
Sure.
But let's assume we've had our physical hi. I am a brand new Alexa Fire Stick.
Okay.
And I'm getting plugged into a television that's not smart.
Yep.
And I have to work within the internet in that house.
Right.
So my homeowner picks me up and they say, okay, the network name here is Bob's Place.
Yeah.
Now, I see the network and my owner types in whatever the password is. What happens next?
So at that point, what's happening is the Fire Stick, you're connecting to the Wi-Fi network, which is another episode entirely on its own that we're going to talk about, and the downfalls of Wi-Fi and why it's so great and why it's so terrible. But that'll be an entirely other episode. So when you connect to the Wi-Fi, at that point, or let's say, for instance, you are one of the Fire Sticks that has a physical LAN port on it, or
Fire
a place
TV
where you
Cube.
can plug in the Ethernet cable. Yeah, exactly. Do we still have that in here?
It's in my office.
Is it? Okay. So at that point, what will happen is you basically connect to the network, and you will. So you're a Fire Stick, you connect. Yep.
I'm connecting to you. You have to give me something.
So first, when you connect, you actually will say, hi, I'm new here.
Right.
So you send out, the new device will send out a broadcast of some kind that says, hi, I'm new, I'm looking for the router.
And here is my identification, typically Mac.
Yep, and like we talked about last week, you send out the MAC address. There's a couple extra things that happen. It actually looks for a specific range of IP addresses. Again, that's where we were talking about the dedicated IP addresses last week. If you didn't see that episode, go back in there and check out that episode. We go into a little bit more detail about it. So anyways, what will happen then is you will broadcast and looking for the router. The router then hears that and sends back and says, hey, I'm the router. This is now your IP address. This is the nickname I'm giving you. You are now 192.168.0.14. That's what you are, okay? So now at that point, the router is able to say, hey, the rest of the equipment on the entire network, we have a new person. This is 14. So here's
and 14 is now officially reserved unless power goes out and it starts all over again.
Unless it's a nice router that retains all of that information and does a pretty good job of keeping it on the same location.
So it remembers that MAC address and that assigned IP address.
If it's a good router. There are other routers out there. The ones you get from your service providers and whatnot usually aren't nearly as good as the ones that don't have access, or that they're nowhere near as good as the aftermarket routers that are out there, even the ones that you pick up from like Walmart or Best Buy, which are light years beyond what the ISP provides for you. And then, of course, there's the ones above that who, if anybody's doing automation systems, I'm sure you're fully aware of things like, the Luxel routers. This is the Epic 5 Ubiquity. There's also Arachnus and Package and whatnot. So, with that
Ruckus
said, those are actually really good because sometimes they retain that information after a reboot, so that if maybe you did some programming for the dynamic address, that you can still keep that dynamic address, and it does a decent job of keeping it there. Now, that's essentially what DHCP is and essentially how it works, and that's basically the end of the episode.
But it's not.
But it's not.
Because there's some other cool stuff, because one of the things you and I do when we work together is we start, and this will be a little bit greater depth in a future episode, but let's stick with DHCP.
Yep.
We start to VLAN our different types of products.
Yes.
To their own effective DHCP range.
Yep.
And what is the advantage of doing that?
So there's a couple things, and you're alluding to VLANs, and
we'll get deeper in that down the road.
We'll talk about those and when and why and how and all that kind of good stuff. So when you are having multiple VLANs, at that point, each VLAN will normally have a DHCP pool. And essentially what the pool is just a range of addresses that the router can go in there and say, okay, I have a new device, I need another address to give this device. So it'll go there, grab an IP address, and give it to that device.
Now,
and that's what
do you set that pool as the integrator?
So, as the integrator, yes, because you want to have as much control over that as possible, or at least I do. I'm the kind of integrator that I don't want to leave anything up to chance when it comes to networking, because honestly, if I don't have the right IP address put into something, I can't talk to it, because I'm not going to go out there and find the right IP address, unless I'm using something like SDDP for Control 4, or if you're using the search tool with our SpyClops equipment. So you really want to make sure that you have more control over that. And that's kind of where we come into the next topic of what we're talking about with DHCP, which is, hit the button here. Well, what is DHCP? We'll hit the next one.
Generally this is my gig.
I know, right? Yeah. There we go. Okay.
What is it?
When should DHCP be used?
I don't know. When should DHCP be used, Adam?
Okay, so in most applications inside of a client's home, let's say you were only putting in a kit NVR system, and you go in the house and you plug that in and everything's good to go. You turn on DHCP on that, collect your paycheck, and you walk away. At that point, you're done. You don't have to mess with DHCP. You don't have to turn it off. You don't have to set a static IP address, because with our systems, of course, you have the cloud service that's available for that. But that's when you should use DHCP, when you don't need to have a static IP address set aside specifically for that device. Now, if you're running into a problem with the cloud service, either their security doesn't allow cloud service actions, or if there's something else going on where you have to do port forwarding, at that point, then you need to worry about having a static IP address.
Well, then, on that note, real quick.
Yep.
Let's say, for example, a job you and I have done recently that has a number of devices. Specifically, we're going to go with the Control 4 at this point.
Sure.
I can sign in from the outside knowing my address to the modem. Mm-hmm. Do I need a static on the primary controller for the Control 4 system, or is DHCP adequate?
So again, with Control 4, they operate with things a little bit differently. They're not using the IP address. While they are, they're not. They're using port forwarding with UPnP to gain access to it. So with them, what they're doing instead is they'll connect to it via the serial number or the MAC address. And so when you connect to it remotely, like we do from here, we'll connect to it remotely. At that point, then you don't have to worry about whether or not it has a static IP address.
So DHCP is perfectly all right.
It's perfectly fine for that system. Now, let's talk about when, at that point, well, what if we have a device like over there, we have the Vantage system, the Vantage lighting system. The problem is that if I left the Vantage lighting system on a dynamic IP address, Control 4 may lose connection to that Vantage lighting system, which would not be good.
Because it's not looking at the MAC.
Correct. It's not looking for the MAC address. It's not using SDDP to find the new address or anything like that. Instead, It's just using the IP address. So if it changes to something different, even if it's 1 digit off, if it's 192.168.0.14,
wrong is wrong.
if it changes to 15, that's still not right. It's still not right there at the correct address.
If you ain't first, you're last.
Yeah, Ricky Bobby, shake and bake. There we go. So we've got Leo on here. Hey, Leo, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for checking in. By the way, guys, again, leave a comment, leave a question over in the chat section or in the comment section down below. Right now, until the end of this series, we are putting in a bunch of different, we are giving you the opportunity to win this 4-channel NVR kit. And every SpyClops Pro kit. But this gives you an opportunity to do that, and so check in next week's episode, the week after that. At the end of the series, we'll be giving that away. So every new episode that we have, you get an opportunity to put your name in to win to win it.
The SpyClops Pro kit.
Yep. So.
Okay.
Great.
So.
Well, one more thing. He says, I'm not going to say your name live on air because I don't want to get in trouble with that, but. FWT, we'll say that. FWT is in the chat. He says, thanks, guys, for putting this info in layman's terms for the computer illiterates like myself. Excuse my username, long story. Yeah, no, don't worry about it. FWT. Thanks to the Edge Group for turning us on to you. So, yeah. The Edge Group, by the way, yes, the Edge Group is part of one of our buying groups. So, again, Edge Group, if you're on here as well, thanks for turning your dealers on to us as well.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, hit the bell notification to let you know when we do go live, which, of course, is every Wednesday at 3 p.m.
And you can see us 24 hours a day after that. Now, let's get back to products that communicate internally at a LAN.
Yes.
As you mentioned, the Vantage.
Yep.
So the Control 4 has to know specifically, with no questions, where it's connecting to. So in that point, you do have to do a static instead of allowing DHCP, because we're not just broadcasting out or requesting information, we are sending instructions. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you look at, say, an Amazon Fire Stick, an Apple TV, a media server, it is merely sending out a request for data to come back to it, and all it's going to do is based on that DHCP.
Right.
It's not getting called, it's calling out.
Yes, correct.
So to call to a device, you really should have a static IP on the call to device.
Yes, correct. And in that case, you do want to make sure that you've got, static IP address. Now, let's talk about that actually. So let's talk about the differences between a static IP address and a dynamic IP address. And that's really where the dynamic host configuration protocol comes from, because with a dynamic address, it means that if the router so chooses, or if it needs to, it can change your IP address. That's what dynamic means. It's change.
Can be disconcerting on occasion.
It can, and it can cause problems, but the truth of the matter is that sometimes it fixes problems, because if a reboot happens and a new device gets connected to the network, and that new device has a static IP address on the device itself, which we'll talk about that, if it's on the same IP address as another device that was in the DHCP pool, well, if it's the same IP address, you're going to have conflicts on the network. So the dynamic part of it's great, because the router will see there's already a device at that address. I need to give it a new IP address to be something different. And so that's helpful. It is very helpful.
Now,
so
I do have a question on that.
Yeah.
Do you want me to hold?
Hold that, because
Okay.
I want to talk about static IP addressing.
Well, and it's in relation to that, but keep going.
Okay. So yeah, so at that point, so static IP addressing instead is where I'm going in and saying, I need this device at this IP address. I don't want it to have any other IP addresses.
Because it's a call to typically.
Yeah, normally it's a call to or something like that.
Okay, so let's talk about something like a video surveillance system.
Yep.
Well, we've got 4, 8, 16, 24 cameras, whatever.
Yep.
Now, the cameras come out of the box all with their own MAC.
Mm-hmm.
Do you leave the cameras on DHCP? And the MAC is the primary connection point?
So on the old camera system, the old SpyClops legacy system, on that system, you would want the cameras to be on a static IP address. Because at that point, what's happening is the NVR is going to that specific stream from the camera. It's going to the camera. That way, the NVR, it doesn't matter if the NVR is on a different address, because the camera's not looking for the NVR is looking for the camera. Now on the new systems, it doesn't matter if you're using the PoE ports on the back of the system, because those ports actually auto-configure the cameras directly, which is a really awesome feature. If you guys get an opportunity to call us up, call up your rep in the sales department or your distributor, ask them some questions about it. Really happy with this new system. It's great. You plug in the cameras to the back of it. Yeah, honestly, it's one of those things where you plug it into the back of the system and the cameras just show up. That's basically it. That's not just the kits, that's also the standalone a la carte system. So if you buy the NVR and the cameras separate, you can take those cameras, plug them into the back of the NVR, and they just show up and work, which is great.
Let's assume we're plugging into a PoE network switch.
So in that case, then yes, you would want to have the cameras on a static IP address, because again, the NVR is looking for those cameras, and if you say, hey, NVR, look for this IP address, that's where the camera's going to be. Well, if it's not there, if it moved, it's not going to find anything. There's no stream for it to find for that camera. So we actually had a question on here. What is the DORA process? It's We Are Yoga. We Are Yoga, the DORA process, I will tell you exactly what it is because I cheated and looked. It's the Discover, Offer, Request, and Acknowledge surface. That's what happens during the DHCP connection when you first connect. We were talking about the Amazon.
So it's EDID.
It's, well, sure. Yeah, basically. So what will happen, the new device will get on the network and it'll send out a Discover ping of sorts. Then at that point, the router will then come back and offer a connection.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry, a ping? That sounds like a hot plug.
Pretty much. So then at that point, it will offer an IP address. Now, the device then at that point can actually request back and say, nope, I don't want that IP address, I want something different. Or if it's a static IP address that doesn't have it, then the router sends back and says, sure, that's fine, you can have whatever you want.
Assuming, because the router will verify there's nothing else sitting
right
at that address.
Now, there's some other things involved with that as well, but that's basically what the DORA process is. So Dora the Explorer is connecting IP systems.
Was it in fact named after?
I have no.
Dora
I don't think. Maybe Dora the Explorer was named after this. I don't know. Maybe, possibly, probably not.
So basically, your history is inadequate.
That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Okay, just checking.
So in this case, what happens from here is when we get the device then set aside. So we've got dynamic addresses and we have static addresses. From there, where we go with it next is, well, which one should we use? And we've kind of already talked about that. Should we use a static IP address for this device, or should we use a dynamic?
For years, you wanted to do static in home because the intelligence of the devices.
Right.
And there's a lot of call too. But as we've seen in the past couple of years, so much has changed that it's no longer everybody has to have their own special niche in the world.
Right.
It can now be a group therapy, and it works wonderfully.
Yeah. So, and it does. It works a lot better now because things are looking for MAC addresses, or they're looking for specific broadcasts or pings of some kind. That's what SDDP is using for like Control 4 and whatnot. Leo's saying she has everything in that backpack. She's talking about Dora. So you are correct. She has just about everything.
Now, see, sadly, I'm an old man.
So you don't follow along with that?
I've heard of her. You know, I've seen...
Well, I have kids, and so
I've seen stuff on the internet about her, and I think there was a live-action movie.
Swiper, no swiping. You know, I'm a map, I'm a map, I'm a map, I'm a map. And then there's, hang on, wait, what's his name? Dino Dan? No, that's a different show. Anyways, moving on. We're having fun today. So let's talk about this then. How do we set a static IP address?
Well, it's going to depend on the product.
Using DHCP.
I am going to guess, and this is a guess.
Sure.
I'm going to guess we enable DHCP. The device calls out to the router, gets back an address, and then we disable DHCP, and that address becomes fixed for effective purposes to that device, both at the device and at the router.
No. Well,
half right?
You're half right. So
which half is right?
Leo actually had the answer to this one earlier on. That's why I didn't call it out, Leo. Leo says, in the case of a Roku, MAC reservation.
Okay.
So DHCP reservation or MAC reservation or IP address reservation or DHCP pool reservation or whatever you want to call it, that's basically what's happening. I am saying, okay, this device, this Xbox has a MAC address of this. I'm going to put that information into the router to begin with and say, hey, I want this router. By the way, router, if you see this MAC address, give it this IP address. then at that point, what I've done is I've now reserved, that's where that reservation comes from, I've now reserved that IP address for that device specifically, making sure that I keep everything in order. There's a tool out there. In fact, I think I've already shared it out a couple times from a couple episodes back. There's an IP address map or a project map. Get it? I'm a map, I'm a map, I'm a map, I'm a map. Dora, the Explorer, is going to show up a lot more often in the next couple episodes.
See, now I'm actually going to have to go back.
I think you're going to have to go watch
and
it.
YouTube Dora.
Yeah. So there's a map out there, and basically it's a worksheet. And at that point, it gives you the ability to write down all the different MAC addresses of all the different devices and kind of lay out exactly where you want them to be on the network.
Which, in my opinion, you should do before you set up your system.
Yes.
Because if you've got automation, you got keypads, you've got your streaming devices, you've got your AV devices, you've got your video surveillance devices, you may have a Ring or a Nest or a Google Cam.
Yep.
And all of these things, first off, you start to increase your network traffic dramatically.
Yeah.
Which is why we're going to get into VLANs here in the near future.
Yep. Yep.
But you also start to run out of available addresses. I don't like to put addresses on top of each other.
Or you just forget where it's at, because at that point, yeah, exactly. You may forget where it's at. So what will happen is you'll come back and you'll get a phone call, say, hey, this device isn't working. Control 4 is not working. Crestron's not working.
I had an Amazon call today. I had to go and power cycle.
Yep.
A Fire Stick.
Yep. And depending on what the device is, it may not need to be power cycled. It may need to, maybe the network is down for that device or something else. And so looking at the network, you can say, well, this IP address was there before, and it's not there now. That means that I've lost connection somewhere, somehow.
I would like to throw a tech tip in just based on what I just said. We have run into several issues with Fire Sticks and the dots for audio.
Okay.
Where they get warm, even if they're fully exposed, and what you'll start to see is no network connection.
Okay.
Or very slow response from the remote.
Okay.
Or stuttering audio.
Good to know.
And the only solution to this is unplug it.
Let it sit.
Let it cool down. Plug it back in, it'll pull a new IP. Everything works again. The remote responds. And this does not appear to be based on environment.
Because it's open, maybe it's fully open there and everything.
It just seems to happen.
May have just been a firmware update that the device is starting to use more power or something like that.
It's a good thing. It's a good idea to start thinking about switching controlled power supplies on all these kinds of devices going forward. Whether it's a Tuya based like our 603 or standalone product or an IP based outlet, something that you can cycle these. And one of the things we've discussed on a regular basis is once a week at say 3 a.m. in the morning, you do need to turn your modem and your router off and let them take a break. They need a little vacation.
Yep. It's good to do, just like any other computer system. These are miniature computers. It's good to reboot them every now and then so that they can get a good fresh start.
I'm sorry, what did we say at the end?
Reboot early, reboot often.
Exactly.
So, and actually, we have another question from We Are Yoga.
Thank you.
They're asking, does DHCP DHCP uses port 67 and 68? You are correct. More importantly, port number 67 is the destination port for the server, so for the DHCP server, and port 68 is used by the client. So that means when we start the Dora, right? So the discovery, hang on. Da-da-da.
You gonna look it up again?
I'm gonna look it up again. Where are we at here? The discover, the offer, the request, and the acknowledge. During the discover process, you were actually sending out a ping for a specific port, 67.
Hot plug,
right?
Hot plug here.
Right? And you understand hot plug.
Yeah.
Then at that point, the router will then respond, or the server will then respond on port number 68 to that device.
Oh, what are you?
Yeah. What are you? What's going on?
Very much like HDMI.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I wonder where they got the idea. HDMI.
From Philips. And well, that was a whole episode. We did a whole episode on that, didn't we?
Amazing how the two connect, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Because essentially all it is serial connections. You're just going back and forth and saying, hey, I'm here, and this is, what are you going to do, and all that kind of good stuff. That's pretty much what we're dealing with. So, okay. Now, what do you prefer?
Blondes, brunettes, redheads?
Do you prefer DHCP reservation or MAC reservation or IP reservation? Or do you prefer going directly to the device and setting a static IP address?
Honestly, it depends on the product, and
Okay.
I'll tell you why. For example, if I'm remoting into something that's not cloud-based like Control 4.
Sure.
Now I'm going to step back to older Crestron because I'm still an old guy.
Sure.
I prefer static addresses on my Crestron products and my Vantage products.
Can we back up a second? You're still an old guy? Are you ever going to not be an old guy? Or
there was a point in time prior to automation when I wasn't an old guy.
Okay. All right. Continue on.
But if I'm dealing with legacy automation products, I much prefer a static IP that's documented. I know where it is because you're not going out through the cloud.
Right.
You're going directly to the device.
Yep.
And if you're going to the device and you don't know where you're going,
Yep.
you're in the dark.
Yeah.
And it ain't pretty.
Yeah.
With the newer automation systems like the Control 4,
Mm-hmm.
it is not looking at it from a direct, it's looking at it through Control 4 servers to a MAC address, regardless of where that MAC address is.
Right.
Which is a huge benefit in my book.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Because I no longer have to keep giant logs of all my addresses.
Yep. Although it's still one of those things that I recommend doing because I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to things like that. I would much rather, even down to specific devices like a laptop or a cell phone, I still give those, if I know that those devices are always going to be on this network or going to come back to this network, I reserve an IP address for it because I may not want it in the DHCP pool. I may want it somewhere else. So if it's going to be there, that leaves me more available IP addresses.
Which takes us into a future episode of VLAN.
VLAN, yeah. We'll work our way back into VLAN. So we've talked about when to use DHCP, when to use DHCP reservation, the differences between dynamic and static IP addresses. So now the next question is, let's see if it comes up on the screen, why shouldn't you use DHCP?
Because you don't always know what address you're going to get.
That's the most simple and straightforward answer. And honestly, but let's open that up a little bit more. When shouldn't you use DHCP reservation or IP address reservation? And you were talking specifically...
Now, see, that's a tougher question.
It is, and because honestly, a lot of it comes down to personal preference. Like myself, I like to have one specific location because I can have everything go to the router. It's easy to set up because it's one spot. I don't have to hunt down the different addresses or different devices, log into them, or use the on-screen interface or something like that to get a static IP address. I can just go to one location. Now, and the benefit to that also is the fact that if I'm like for instance, if I'm using a Luxel router, if I then, that router goes bad or something else, if I have taken a backup of the configuration and I replace it with the same unit,
you're not starting over from scratch.
I'm not starting over from scratch. I can just put everything back into that same one.
Okay. A good example of this is,
Sure.
Let's say your Wi-Fi goes bad at your house, and you have to replace the Wi-Fi system.
Yep.
Do you use the exact same username and password that you did before? On the previous router? Not for the admin, but for the devices.
So...
I do, because I don't want to have to go through every damn device in the house and change them.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, for the Wi-Fi. So that way it makes it a little bit easier.
Not the admin side, but the device side.
Now, I have run into in the past, and this is something that I've got to do more research on for our Wi-Fi episode, but I have run into in the past where I have replaced like an access point or a router or something like that, and I've done that, but all the devices refuse to connect to that new Wi-Fi.
You generally have to power cycle.
Well, and I've done a power cycle, and at that point it didn't connect. And in fact, I'll tell you what, everybody, if you would put the answer to this, if you know what the answer is, put it in the comments or in the chat section over here to the side. Let me know. Did I miss something on my end of it? Because I'll use that inside the Wi-Fi episode when we talk about it. And you know what? For the heck of it, if you get the answer correct, I'll put your name in the runnings for a second time.
Ooh, a twofer.
Twofer. So, with that said, when shouldn't you use the DHCP reservation or DHCP pool or anything like that?
My statement on that is going to be if you're dealing with an older product or something that's got to be called to every time and you know where it's got to go.
And it's always going to be at that address.
Right, and it's a call to.
Yeah.
Meaning the processor is calling out and sending commands specifically to something that has to happen.
Yep.
We're not looking at a media server that's calling out to watch the latest episode of Lucifer.
Yep.
We're looking for the control center to send a command to turn the lights on.
So, and we'll use that as the example. That's exactly where I was going with it. We use, at this job that we've alluded to or talk about all the time, we use the Vantage lighting system there, and we talk to it over the network from Control 4. That specific system, I am doing both. I am doing a dynamic reservation or an IP address reservation through the router, but I'm also doing a static IP address on the Vantage system. Those numbers match. I made sure that they matched. That way there's no conflict or anything else happening there. But it's primarily because, to be perfectly honest, we've changed the network in that house 3 times.
At least.
And so at that point, I'm not keeping the same router in place. I'm using different routers. It's not necessarily that we're trying new systems
just
in there.
learning
It's
stuff.
just we're learning stuff and figuring that we have problems with other ones, so we get more reliable ones. But
Oh, we've had
That's
some. It lives on the beach, and there's no real ground, and we have dealt with some.
yeah, we've dealt with
EST
some
spikes.
really bad problems. Rude Technologies is saying DHCP reservations outside of the DHCP pool for fixed devices. Yes.
And we do the reservations and the static so that the DHCP router will not accidentally give that address to something else.
There's actually something really interesting about this, Rue. You bring up a really good point. There are some systems out there, and I believe PackEdge is one of them. You can't, inside the router, when you do the static reservation, the IP address reservation system, you can't give it an address outside of a DHCP pool to that device. You have to give it an address that's from the pool if you do the reservation system that way. Honestly, I ran into that once on a job and refused to use it again because that's my whole reasoning behind it is I want it outside of that pool. I want it to be on something outside of that pool because
It's never going to be picked up.
Never wanted to be picked up. Never let there be a chance that it could be picked up by something else. So you are correct. It's in certain circumstances there are devices out there, only because I've run into it myself, where they don't let you use an address out of that pool. So yeah, if you run into that, honestly, if it was me, I'd go to something else.
Find another product.
I really would. Yeah. So now, when else, Brent, should we use a static IP address on the device itself?
I don't have an answer to that one.
So,
but I bet you do.
So here's the thing. Some people hate the idea of DHCP reservation because they may be doing what we did, where we replaced the router with something different, or we move from we move from a lower end unit to a higher end unit, and at that point the configuration file doesn't transfer over from one to the other. At that point, or if you have another device that's never going to leave the network, it's never going to do something different. You want to give it the same static IP address. Honestly, at that point, go to the device, set the IP address for that, and you're done. Now,
I would still give it a static reservation at the.
Yeah,
to protect that address.
One extra layer of control, right? One extra way of making sure that it's at the right spot. So it's not really necessarily, to be honest, perfect. When it comes down to it, I'm a big proponent of using dynamic reservation myself because it just works out. It's easier to do. You get it backs up. You can back it up and use it that way.
And hopefully you're staying with the same brand and product or series.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully.
So, yeah, Rue, exactly. He's saying, which is why we stopped using PackEdge and moved to Arachnus. And that's what I ran into as well. So, and I'm glad to see that I'm not the only one out there. Again, everybody, thank you for checking in on today's episode.
And if we have something wrong on something, as we have said in the past, let us know.
And we've been called out for it, and we were happy
it turned into
to
a
get
great
called
episode.
out. Oh, it did. It was great. We got to get David from CEDIA on. By the way, David, if you're watching this episode, we'd love to have you on again. Thanks again for that. But special setup today as, again, if anybody who's left a comment in the chat section or is leaving a comment down in the comment section below, this is your opportunity to be put in the runnings for the 4-channel PoE SpyClops Pro kit. We're going to be giving this away at the end of our series on networking devices. So go out there and tell your friends and everybody else.
Does the 4-channel offer the rack ears?
No, that does not offer the rack ears. But it is a 4-channel, and that kit actually is expandable up to 16 cameras.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. Now, you do need a PoE switch with that. It only has the 4 PoE ports on the back of it. That's why we call it the 4-channel.
But it's capable of supporting 16 cameras with an outboard PoE switch.
Which is one of the reasons why we're having this conversation about DHCP and DHCP reservation and static and dynamic IP addresses. So.
And it's actually, this really is simple enough for an old man like me to set up.
Really, you plug it into the internet, you plug in the cameras, you plug in the HDMI cable to the TV, and you're done. I mean, that's really all it comes down to. You may need to turn on DHCP for it to get a network connection, but other than that, you're good to go. So definitely check it out. But honestly, that's pretty much all I had to talk about today.
Well, it was a short episode. It's only 56 minutes and 22 seconds long so far.
Yeah, well, that's when we started recording. So we've been on for about 40 minutes here. But with that said, everybody, thank you for checking us out today.
Don't forget to let your friends and neighbors know. Uh-oh. That scares me.
Dora wants her royalties. Nickelodeon, you can call us. Actually, no, don't call us.
I can tell you where I can tell you where we're not getting royalties
Don't
from.
call us. Yeah, let's see. And then Lawrence is saying you guys are doing a great webinar for inexperienced guys like me. We're happy to do it. Honestly, it's one of the biggest reasons that we're doing this.
If you got a great idea for us,
yeah,
share it with us.
honestly, that's why we go out there to do this for you. So if you have ideas for what we should talk about, put it over in the comments or in the chat section or down in the comment section below. As always, you can contact us directly. My phone number here, or sorry, the tech support line here is 386-492-8584. You can contact Brent at 866-839-9187, extension 220.
Now you'll notice that I still have an old series number and extension because I don't get the cool phones that the hardworking guys do.
Now, soon your numbers can be updating, and we will, of course, update that here on the screen for you as well. You can see, of course, our contact number is down here on the screen as well, so definitely feel free to reach out to us there. You can email us, adamr@metrohometheater.com or brentm@metrohometheater.com.
Soon to be Metro AV.
Yeah, soon to be Metro AV. We're working on that.
Yep. As the world is changing,
Yep.
we're no longer going to be just home theater.
Correct.
So through the years, we have progressed from Ethereal
Yep.
to Metro Home Theater to Metro AV over the course of this year.
Yeah. So we will be moving into that as well. And luckily our email addresses,
Which makes for a much shorter web address.
It does, but if you have our old addresses saved, of course, you can still use those and it'll just forward to the other one. So, but other than that, guys, thanks for checking us out. As always, like, share, subscribe, hit that bell notification. It lets us know that we're doing good things for you. There may also be a requirement that you're subscribed and you like the video in order to be put in the runnings, but I'll have to talk to management about that to see how that works.
If you got a great idea for a video, whether it's a short 30-second, a 5-minute, or one of our shows, let us know, because Adam and I love to stand here and pontificate.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. It's fun. Anyways, everybody, thanks for checking in. Like, share, subscribe. Brent, where can they find us?
MetroHomeTheater.com or Metro Home Theater YouTube.
Yeah. So
obviously you're there already.
Well, yeah. So Brent, what should we do?
Reboot early, reboot often.
Don't cut your wires too short.
Call tech support.
Turn off CEC. And call tech support.
And call tech support. See, I got you all flummoxed.
You got me all backwards.
Have a good day. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
We're out of here.